I'm Joseph.
And I'm Nick.
This is Fish Jelly.
Mm-hmm.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
We're recording this Friday late afternoon
Uh-huh.
because I'll be in Vegas this weekend.
Uh-huh.
I was given some very nice tickets a ticket to see Mariah Carey.
Screaming Mimi.
Screaming Mimi.
That's an old Anita Ekberg film, but yes.
I haven't seen her in concert in like 20 years.
Oh, what a treat.
So that should be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good for you. I've never seen her in concert.
Well, you're not the biggest fan of her music.
More of, I find her slightly annoying, but she's very talented. Yeah.
I know a lot of her music,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd be lying if I said I listened to it really ever.
She's got like 5 songs I like really like, and then I don't know.
I honestly don't think about her a lot, which is weird because I mean she is such a huge. I mean she's the number one recording artist of the '90s, so obviously was a very big part of my high school and college experience. But
to me, it sounds like you're saying I don't know her.
No, I'm very familiar with her work.
I know, I'm kidding.
But I just like she's just not. She wouldn't even be in like my top 10.
Yeah, same.
Which is weird because I know so much of her music and I have a lot of it. But so it'll just be nice to revisit it. I haven't deliberately been listening to any of her music, which is odd because usually when I go to a concert, I kind of load up. So,
well, I mean, you're going to be driving, so.
Well, I think it'll be. I'm hoping that listening to it kind of fresh, like in the moment, will
reinvigorate your admiration. I mean, she's a great lyricist, and of course, there's really no one that used to have the range she did, but yeah.
We don't talk politics, but when we ended last Sunday's podcast, like as soon as it ended, we saw that Kamala Harris would be running for president.
Yeah,
because Biden had
finally conceded. What an exciting week that's been. Yes.
So that's been interesting.
Oh yeah, no, I feel great.
Speaking of that, it seems you're very excited about Venice, and you have a list of films you're looking forward to.
As always, I'm always excited about Venice.
Do you want to talk about this list?
Well, yeah, I think I don't know. Venice usually doesn't have late updates like Cannes does, like a couple of last minute additions. So this is most likely going to be it. Although I think I read an interview with the festival director who kind of teased that there might be something else. But in no particular order, The Last Jockey I am excited for by Luis Ortiz. It's in the main competition, and mainly because I really liked his last film, The Prince. Sorry, Luis Ortega, also known as El Angel. That was a very queer film. Anyway, that has my interest. Quiet Life, the latest film from Alexandros Avranos, Greek director. I think he was kind of at the tail end of the Greek weird wave clutch of people, thanks to a 2013 film he did called Miss Violence, which I really liked. Since then, he did that film with Jim Carrey, where he's some kind of investigate. I don't even remember the specifics of the plot. I saw it in Warsaw when we were there, which it felt very much like a foreign director doing kind of a English language production that didn't make sense, despite having a really great cast. April, the next film from Dea Kulumbegashvili, Georgian filmmaker. I know I'm butchering her last name. I forgot to relook up how to pronounce it, but I loved her first film, Beginning, from 2020. So that's exciting to be in the main competition. The Room Next Door, which is being called Pedro Almodovar's English language debut because it's feature length, although he did a version of The Human Voice during the pandemic with Tilda Swinton, which is a short film based on the play by Cocteau. But this says Julianne Moore and Tilda Swinton. So that is very exciting. Also, it's an A24 film by Helena Rain, the lady who did Bodies, 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 starring Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson, Antonio Banderas. And it has kind of a sleazy. The plot description is: a career woman in her 40s embarks on an affair with a 21-year-old intern. Um, so Nicole Kidman's in her 40s in this. Anyway, I'm excited for that. The Brutalist, the latest from Brady Corbett, whose previous two films as a director I quite liked, including Childhood of a Leader and Vox Lux. I believe you are also a fan of Vox Lux. And I've talked to many people that think the exact opposite of myself on that, but I quite liked it. I guess it's something like 175 minutes, and there's going to be a 15-minute intermission. 15-minute intermission. And inspiration for it was Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. I've read that. I've read Atlas Shrugged, but now I have to read Fountainhead before Venice in preparation. Fabrice Duwel's new film, Maldoror. I've been highly anticipating. That's out of competition, but he's a fantastic genre director, and I always am excited to see what he's doing. And then Luca Guadagnino's adaptation of William S. Burroughs' memoir, Queer, which I read years and years ago and quite liked. So people have been trying to develop that for a long time. Steve Buscemi for a while. Everybody, the hype already is that Daniel Craig is reinventing himself in this very erotic, sexually explicit queer role. Daniel Craig's played queer before in Love Is the Devil and
Ain't that right?
Infamous. Huh?
I said, ain't that right?
Mm-hmm. And Infamous, where he played the murderer that Capote has the dalliance with, played by Toby Jones in that version. But yeah, so that's just basically a rundown of off the top of my head. You know, Sigourney is getting a Lifetime Achievement Golden Lion. I was hoping that Brian Fuller's Dust Bunny would be somewhere in the lineup because of that, but maybe it's got a lot to still complete in post. I don't know. And then Isabelle Huppert, of course, is the jury president. And I was still hoping that some kind of weird little thing would show up with her, but it hasn't.
Is that it?
For now, yes.
Speaking of film festivals, I'll be attending the Toronto International Film Festival.
Yes.
I don't know who told me to do this. Was it you?
Me.
You sent me a thing that TIFF is doing like a media inclusion.
Well, it was from Rotten Tomatoes, and then we discussed it.
I honestly don't remember how it came across my desk, but I applied, and the purpose of it is to offer people who are trying to break into the industry of film criticism and expand or amplify different voices in that sphere, giving them the opportunity to attend. So I just applied, and they said I could come. They offer a little stipend, which is nice of them. It's certainly not enough to.
If you're pressed for cash, it's still not enough to make it lucrative to go for that reason. But it's still nice. Yeah,
it is. I mean, it's not enough to. I mean, certainly for me to travel in the way that I require, but fortunately I can take care of that myself. But so I'll be at the Toronto International Film Festival.
This is the first time you've been since I brought you in 2010.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to buy me things while I'm there, you can inquire about that option.
And right before that, I will also be in Locarno.
Yep.
In Switzerland. Yep.
Okay, I wasn't intending on talking about this, but I received many messages after Tyler Perry went on Kiki Palmer's podcast and basically referred to some critics who didn't like his new film as highbrow Negroes. So, of course, I watched that portion of the interview, and I mean, I'm going to time myself so I don't rant for too much, but there are several things that he said that bothered me, but I think there's so many things because of course, like overwhelmingly with specifically 3 of the 4 films he reviewed, A Jazzman's Blues got a little more love than his average film, but the 3 we did review, or the 3 others, overwhelmingly people agreed that those films were garbage.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, you get the comments of people saying, like, how dare you criticize him and blah, 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 and whatever. But
I can and I will.
first of all, I think I'm not saying Tyler Perry shouldn't make movies. He can do whatever he wants to do. My criticism really stems from this idea that, well, two things, which I always say. I don't think people know how to discern between liking something, but also admitting that this may not be quality.
Correct.
And people do that for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of y'all do some real raggedy shit, but it's like because you like it and you don't have to explain. Some of y'all like to dip your pizza in ranch. I mean, I think that's trash, but like if it's tasty to you, then that's great. But to convince me that like
hey,
your frozen Red Baron pizza dipped in Hidden Valley Ranch dressing is gourmet is just like, I think most people would argue that that's not the definition of what that is. And I think what Tyler Perry does for the overwhelmingly is not what anyone who has taken who has a screenwriting degree, who has done film and TV production, anyone who is a trained cinematographer. Like, I think overwhelmingly you could argue that, like, objectively what Tyler Perry does would not be considered quality filmmaking.
In fact, sometimes I think he's downright reductive in the presentation of his own community.
But I've said a million times before, that doesn't mean that people can't enjoy his films. I enjoy moments of a lot of his films.
Sure, same. And I like other things that I've been accused of liking trash my whole life. That's
so
fine.
Then saying that someone's trying to squash his voice is ludicrous because he is, I mean, he's beyond, I mean, you can't even say he's just a successful Black filmmaker. I mean, he is a titan in Hollywood, and he's not even in Hollywood. So no one's like minimizing his voice. But as a person of color, as a Black person, my concern, and we were talking about this the other day, I wonder if you go ask like your average 40-year-old white person, can they name a Black filmmaker?
Mm-hmm.
And one would hope that they could conjure Spike Lee. I don't know that would be,
or Ava DuVernay, or
Ryan Coogler. I'm assuming anyone who's listening to us is probably more familiar with film, but I'm talking about people who just really are, they only go see a couple movies a year.
Yeah.
They only hear about like the major things. I would assume that for the average American, like white, the average American non-Black person of a particular age, if you ask them, can you name a Black filmmaker? I would assume the person who'd be mentioned the most is Tyler Perry.
Yeah, but I think we both experienced that amongst various white people we talked to. And usually the accompanying statement is, I've never watched any of his films and I don't plan to.
And if you ask this same cohort, can you name Black films? I don't know the answer to this. I would assume that a Madea movie would get thrown in there probably more often than not.
Mm-hmm.
So my concern as a Black person who does care about representation and quality is Tyler Perry the benchmark for what they think all Black people consider to be quality cinema, like fine art in this realm? And I would assume that the Black creatives in this space who endeavor to make quality work against all odds because their voices are not amplified, I'm sure those people would agree that shit sucks.
Well, because Tyler Perry's a businessman. He is not an artist. He does not, what he churns out is not artistry, and he doesn't even speak about it in those terms.
And then I want to read a portion of what he said on Kiki Palmer's podcast. But before I do that, I want to mention that oftentimes when people are mad that I say something about Tyler Perry, they often want to throw back in my face that he has made a lot of money. So I think that if,
again,
it's just because someone has money or you perceive them as being rich, and in some instances, these people are in fact rich, or they're celebrities, that doesn't inherently make someone an expert at anything or qualified to speak to anything other than however they're making their money. Well, the only thing I would listen to Tyler Perry about is any advice on money and How to Be a DL Black Man in America. Those are the only two things that I
Oh
think
my
Tyler
god.
Perry would be able to speak to as an expert. But
Well, even as a DL black man in America, his experience would be unique because of his access to
well, sure,
those
and I'm
areas.
just being bitchy, but
Yeah,
like I just think that this idea that like if you have money or you're famous, somehow you're a success. So then now I want to read what he said on Kiki's podcast, because he points out that a huge amount of his audience is disenfranchised, people who don't have the resources of their richer counterparts, and these snooty fans who don't want him telling stories about maids, beauticians, or others in the service industry don't share the same lived experience. And then he goes on to say that these people, these beauticians and service workers, that they they don't have access to, that they can't hop into their Volvos and go to therapy, and so his movies are a source of like reference for them. So don't discount these people and say their stories don't matter, because who are these highbrow Negroes to say which Black story is important? And so I think that two things are happening here. First of all, no one said that these stories aren't important.
correct.
No one said no one said these stories aren't important. But the bigger issue for me is Tyler Perry really thinks, which is why I thought the movie that everyone said was terrible, Not Another Church Movie, was so on the nose, is because really what it's poking fun at is the fact that people like him, like Oprah, who I think does have the credentials to show that she really has put in. I could just go on and on.
Puts in the work, the research. Well, the thing is about Tyler Perry doesn't actually speak to what those experiences are. There's no research done. I mean, this Megan Good in the last film as a bank professional, there is nothing in that that suggests he realizes what a day in the life of a bank professional is.
Listen, it's people write all kinds of shit that aren't Black. Like there are white filmmakers who tell stories that are we review on a regular basis shitty movies done by white filmmakers who clearly don't understand how life works either, right?
Correct.
We just
Yes.
reviewed The Fabulous Four, and some like, and it was like, oh, clearly the people who wrote this seem to live on a different stratosphere.
Yeah.
But my issue is if you care so much about your quote unquote people, your disenfranchised audience, why don't you tap into that and let those people tell their own stories? Why? What does Tyler Perry know about? The only thing we know that he has said for sure is that he probably grew up feeling different because he was probably confused about his sexuality. We know that he said that he was molested by a male family member,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest is like a mystery.
Mm-hmm. Which is fine.
I'm assuming that that period between when he was homeless, which amounted to him sleeping in his car for a little bit, that period between like him being abused as a kid to the period where he started these plays, I'm assuming he was doing a lot of self-exploration
Yeah.
with it. But what does this person know about? He just keeps telling the same stories about the Black women who were in his life when he was younger, which did involve a lot of abuse, poverty, struggle. I, I don't know how people can advocate for like him, because he would get a pass from me if he would just answer the question like, listen, I love making movies. People like watching them. If it's not broke, why would I fix it? If that man said that, I'd be like, it's done. He's I would do the same thing. If we ended up having millions of subscribers and making a ton of money, and all of a sudden now everyone's taking shots at us for not knowing what we're doing, I would answer the same way. Well, I enjoy what I'm doing. People like consuming it. Why would I change for that the smaller group of people who just don't like what I do? But that's not what he's doing. He's really acting like he's a messiah. Is
Yeah.
it, how can you say, because then the implication is like, so these beauticians, these like working class people, these service workers, like they have no other option but to watch your movie, and the messaging in the movie usually revolves around violence and religion. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
even know how those two things go together, and like that's what you're offering them. So you're saying that, just like I said in our review for Divorce in the Black, is he thinking that there's some woman out there who's in an abusive relationship that she's going to watch this movie and think, so the answer is to lure my abusive man to the house so I can kill him? and I'll just get off
I
because of
mean,
self-defense.
I've seen
Like,
a lot of white ladies in cinema do that, but
sure, but he's not qualified. Like, he just needs to
he's
just admit that, like, I like making movies this way,
and there you
and
go.
and that's it, and that's
And
totally fine.
and it,
I would not harp on him, except that he really does think he's like a messiah.
and and he's gonna keep making them because they keep getting attention, and I think it's fair that they also be criticized the same exact way, but I don't think that you can. That it's just kind of shitty to me that he's hiding behind that kind of an excuse about hidden figures, if you will, in the working class Black community. When it's like you should be, as the titan that you are in your industry, not only just financing. Features from first time Black directors, screenwriters, or even outside like other people of color. But why aren't you putting out open calls for like, I want to read your script? Are there, I'm sure that there are plenty of Black writers that whose scripts you can't get your foot in the door here. It's really hard unless you're doing your own thing, unless you have the resources to do that. So why aren't you fostering a sense of that? Why aren't you reading somebody else's script and be like, you know what, I really like that. Why don't I finance that? I'll direct it. But why?
Well, that's a
Nothing like
question.
that.
That's a question I would have for the people who defend him.
He's
Is
not an auteur. He's
is like, why is he like like, I applaud his success. I've said it before. It like, I love seeing this Black man be such a powerful force in the industry and doing things his way. That's not what I'm hating on. It's just the fact that he makes these shit movies with no intention of doing anything better. Like, he's proud to say that he slaps this shit together. He's proud to. He used to post all the time.
Acrimony was in 7 days.
I stopped
Like,
following him because I thought he was annoying. But he used to post like wrote a script in a day for a movie, sitting out on my the deck of my $15 million cabin in Aspen, and like wrote a script for 2 movies in between workouts. Like, I mean, I just don't.
it's very rinse, wash, repeat, though. Yeah, I don't.
I think we deserve better, but I also wanted to. Well, go ahead.
I don't. To me, again, I always talk about for Colored Girls. To me, that was a kind of a risk for him to do, and of course, the box office receipts reflected that, despite all of the wonderful people in it. But it's you can introduce things to your audience. You can elevate your work. Like, people will still respond to it. People will still engage to it, and you can afford to have, especially making all these things for streaming services. It's not held to the same standards. You could be more subversive. You can be more daring for someone like him.
His comments on Kiki Palmer's podcast came after Lonnie Love, who's one of the hosts of The Real, made a comment about how she wishes he would do essentially what we're saying, like tap other people. But this whole highbrow Negroes thing, I just feels so like the kind of comment that's coming from someone who's just so unwilling to see that perhaps you could do better. But aside from that, Divorce in the Black only has, I believe, 14 Rotten Tomatoes reviews.
Uh-huh.
And half of those, based on the photographs, are from Black people.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go on YouTube and look up Divorce in the Black review, 99% of them are from Black people. And almost all of them are saying this movie's trash. Here he is again on some bullshit, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, if you care about this disenfranchised, like, so do you think everyone who's commenting is like some highbrow Negro? No, like,
Well,
you're a major force in a community that is giving feedback, and instead of thinking like, what can I, but whatever. We've talked a lot about
also
him.
how demeaning to the Black journalists that probably have had to work very hard for where they are to be published where they are, and still are. There's not a lot of Black film journalists, and then to across the board just dismiss all of them.
Right. So then these Black journalists,
like, fuck you.
To these Black journalists who want to be legitimate, and then it's like they probably get assigned or feel like they have to write about this movie, and then so what does he want them to do? Say it's like,
because
top shelf cinema, and then now I'm going to be considered a joke.
Because most of these white journalists do not want to touch it. They do not want to seem negative towards any of his stuff. So so what happens is they just don't deal with it.
Anyway, I'm tired of talking about
but
him right
but
now.
I feel like we've had very similar conversations about Marvel films and
I don't
also
even want to talk about that. We can move on. Uh, something funny that I heard, I was listening to an interview with Jimmy Jam. He was on a podcast that it's like a music podcast, blah, blah, blah. He was telling a story about how, so if people don't know, Jimmy Jam is, and his partner Terry Lewis are prolific producers.
mm-hmm.
I think they're probably most known for producing much of Janet Jackson's music. That's what really sent them over.
Minneapolis.
But they have like 16 like Hot 100 Billboard hits to their credentials and numerous Grammys, blah, blah, blah. But they were used to be part of the band called The Time, which is led by Morris Day.
Mm-hmm.
And The Time used to open for Prince.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jimmy Jam was telling a story about how, because this podcast was asking him how they met Janet Jackson. And he said, oh, well, she used to be a really big fan of The Time. And one time when she was like 14, she got her mother to take her to a concert in Long Beach, which was fortuitous because back then in the early 80s, Jimmy Jam said Prince wouldn't let them open for him in major cities because back then, when there was no internet, they were just, people would write up reviews in newspapers that they would always, the Time would get better reviews than the Prince performance. Like the opening act would get more rave reviews than the main act.
Mm-hmm.
And so Prince wouldn't let the Time open for him in major cities because he didn't want the reviews in like the New York Times or whatever to say that the Time was better than Prince.
Prince had little man syndrome.
So he would only let them open for smaller like
course.
venues. And so he said, thankfully, Janet went to the Long Beach performance, not the LA performance, because Prince wouldn't let them open in LA, but he would let them open in Long Beach. So then I thought, you and I also heard Janet do an interview a couple of weeks ago
Mm-hmm.
where the interviewer asked her about, he asked her a question, I believe that was framed like, what are some things you really love in a concert? And she was on one this interview because this is the interview that there was a video clip of her that went viral saying like, please stop asking me questions.
Mm-hmm.
It was during the same interview that instead of her saying what she really likes in a concert, she decides to share kind of a shady story
Uh-huh.
where she's like, one time I went to go see Prince and he didn't perform the songs we all like
Or no,
he performed like these songs no one knows, and she was really disappointed, which I thought was pretty. We were both kind of surprised she said that.
Yeah,
Like an artist at her level.
Didn't she go on to say that? And I decided that if I were ever at that level or had that platform, that I would never do that to my audience.
Yeah,
or I'm paraphrasing, but yeah.
So that was pretty interesting.
And let's not forget Morris Day was in Purple Rain.
Morris Day was in Purple Rain. Yes, he was. So this is a good segue to the restaurant section because Jimmy Jam also told a story about, the interviewer asked him like, how did you come up with the song What Have You Done For Me Lately, which is the first single from the Control album, which was a hit. And he's like, well, that's a interesting story because the album was finished and then like one of the record label execs said, I just need one more. Like, I just need one more hit. And so they were racking their brains trying to figure out what are they going to try to present to Janet. And so I thought it was cute for anyone who's familiar with Minneapolis because he said they were on their way to Rudolph's Barbecue on Franklin and Lindale.
Oh, I think they're
which
gone
is now
now.
closed.
Yeah,
but I have fond memories of that corner.
Yeah, same.
Not because I was working.
There used to be that video rental store I liked right there, Cinema Revolution.
There was a video rental store that then turned into like a coffee shop.
And then a hairstyling.
Yeah.
And then there was a sandwich place there, Quiznos, for a bit too.
Yes, and you know what? Shout out to Quiznos. Remember, I was obsessed with they used to have salads that had like flatbread, but the flatbread was so good because it was like a big piece of flatbread that they would cut into 4 and then shove into the salad. And then I would get, like the creamy dressing and shake it up. So the bread would get saturated with the dressing.
I remember lots of sauces, which is always a plus in my book.
And then another food related thing is that Nick created a new invention for himself. You made toast with butter and chili oil.
Oh yeah.
And you did it
crunchy garlic chili oil.
Garlic chili oil. And you did it last week and I was like, oh no. And then you did it again today and I tried it. And it's actually very good.
Oh yeah. Well, anything with butter.
But the restaurant we actually went to, so there's a chain called Tu Madre and um, they opened one up right by our house, which is nice, and we went. It was really cute. But I wanted to say that while we were sitting there, I don't know if you noticed, but there were some ladies sitting across from us at the bar.
Yes, I did.
One of whom was like very typical LA, like 5'5", 90 pounds. Like she wasn't even eating the chips. She was kind of licking them and then being like, oh, it's too much. But anyway, her friend took a picture of her. Did you notice that?
No, I was ignoring them.
So you probably noticed me being distracted because I was watching the friend. So the friend took a picture of her, and the friend spent the entire time we were sitting there, because they were there before us and we left before they left. She spent almost that entire time we were sitting there editing, like photoshopping her friend's picture.
Oh, I'm sure she did.
And by the time she was done and posted it, it looked like an entirely different lady.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I thought that was such an LA experience, like sitting in this like trendy place, and the weather was beautiful. It had like open patio.
Which yes, it was beautiful. And it's like, oh God, you know what? I enjoyed being in the moment, in that nice weather, in that nice restaurant with good food, and not worrying about what the fuck I look like.
we need to not use the F word.
Oh shit, sorry. God damn it, I hate that.
A series of expletives. Okay.
Well, and like that's how I talk. So
well,
there you go.
Let's do better. Sorry to this man.
Yeah.
There is something in the sorry to this man section. Do you want to explain what
I was reminded by our friend and listener, Bill Antoniou. It was at last week's podcast where why were we referencing Madonna? Oh, because of her reignited film project about her life. I had referenced when she was bashing hydrangeas to a fan. And I said it was at the Toronto International Film Festival, and that happened in Venice. But I was at Toronto, and that news story broke. And there was also a big news story about her treatment of the volunteers in Toronto, because purportedly she said she didn't want to be approached or looked in the eyes.
Well,
or something to that degree. But I remember everybody talking about that. But, Venice happens, it overlaps with TIFF. So in my head, all of that happened at the same time, but there was a difference.
Yes. Films released we didn't cover. Dee Dee.
I actually saw this and I was supposed to review it, but I wanted to see. It was a hit out of Sundance this past year. Directorial debut of Sean Wang, and I happened to see the trailer at Sing Sing because you didn't see that, and I was like, oh fuck, Joan Chen's in this, and she looked lovely.
Fully demonetized now. Great.
You can bleep. Can't you bleep?
Well, that will take a lot of time for me. Sure.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, I'll try to be more mindful. Yes, and it's set in 2008, which was the year we met. And it's about this young boy. He's Taiwanese American, and father's out of the house. Mother and grandmother kind of are raising him, and he has an older sister that he doesn't quite get along with, and he's trying to navigate his identity. And it's very a demure film, but I think very well done. Trying to kind of interact with, growing up with the internet and having to have this online personality as well, and how that kind of also causes a lot of social identity disorders a bit. But yeah, it's well worth seeing. I think it's expanding. It opened this week, but it'll be expanding more next week.
The Arctic Convoy.
This is from a Norwegian director, Henrik Martin Delsbakken, I believe is how you say that name. But I haven't seen anything else by this director. It's about it's set in 1942, and it's about a bunch of civilian ships that have to bring supplies from Iceland to the Soviet Union, and of course navigate waters that are being terrorized by the Germans.
Projects of interest, The Long Walk.
So I read this book as a teenager. It's Stephen King writing under the pseudonym Richard Bachman, I believe. I remember not love it. I think Thinner was the only book I liked as Richard Bachman that I read back then. But Francis Lawrence, who's not a director I have great faith in, having done some Hunger Games films and Water for Elephants. I can't remember what else off the top of my head. But Judy Greer and Mark Hamill are going to be in this film version. So both of them automatically make this of interest to me.
The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Another remake, James Wan. I mean, technically, Shape of Water by Guillermo del Toro was Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, but I mean, that's heavily influenced. I think I even wrote like that could have been called Creature from the Red Lagoon because the communist undercurrents of that.
Undertones.
But James Wan apparently is going to get to direct a remake.
I'm interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
Next, Famous.
Jody Hill, who I believe is a director who you and I both liked his Observe and Report.
Okay.
Remember?
Is that rated R comedy about a security guard?
With Seth Rogen and
Oh,
a
yeah.
wonderful drunk Anna Faris.
Yes.
Shots. Zac Efron is playing doppelgangers, a famous person and a poor regular person that looks just like the famous one in this A24 project. It's based on a book that sounds interesting enough for me to want to read it.
Lastly, Alter.
This is another A24 project. I know Kyle MacLachlan's in the cast, but what's exciting to me is it is directed by Igor Abramenko, whose film Sputnik was in my top 10 of 2020. Do you remember that Russian film about the alien?
Yes, I remember really liking it.
I loved it. Yeah, so I'm excited to see that he has a new project.
Well, there are no entries in the obituary section, so that's nice.
Huh.
The secret film this week was your choice, and you chose the 1965 British horror thriller film Die, Die, My Darling, also known as the film Fanatic.
And based on a book by Anne Blaisdell called Nightmare, which is what I feel I've seen it before, and I forgot how frustrating it is.
What is Die, Die, My Darling about? A young woman is terrorized by her deceased fiance's demented mother, who blames her for her son's death. That's not quite accurate.
Yeah, that's not quite accurate.
But what is your relationship to this film?
Well, I'm a Tallulah Bankhead fan, and
Whenever I always think of the Bankhead Bounce, but
okay.
I know that name, but I don't know that I could have named a movie she's in. But after watching this, I really liked her.
She didn't have a very strong film career, and I think this was her last film. She died 3 years later. I think she was only 66. She had a reputation. She had a lot of affairs, including, I believe, one with Marlene Dietrich. And she used to get drunk at Hollywood parties and get naked. That was kind of her thing. And she had a very distinct...
So she was a good time gal.
She was a good time gal. And she... Like, her personal story is more fascinating than her film resume, but she was a huge stage star. And if you liked her in this, I highly, highly, highly recommend Hitchcock's Lifeboat. Love that film. She also did a film in the 40s with Preminger called A Great Scandal, something with Scandal, a Royal Scandal, where she plays Catherine the Great. And that's fun also just for her. But she didn't have a lot of box office clout. So that's why you didn't see her a lot. But so I watched this years ago going through, my Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, she's all part of that milieu. And this was something that I used to cherish back then.
Okay, the story. So a very beautiful Stephanie Powers.
From Heart to Heart, yeah.
She makes her way to London with her fiance, Peter Vaughan.
No.
That's not her fiance?
Harry? No.
Oh, Maurice Kaufman.
Yes.
I don't know who these people are. That's why I messed up their
Peter
names.
Vaughan tries to rape her. Mm-hmm.
Well, here, not to be confused. So Stephanie Powers goes to London with her fiance, and when they get there, she's like, oh, well, I didn't tell you, but I'm going to go visit the mother of my ex. And of course he's upset, like, why would you do that? And no, we have plans. But she insists. And she says, due to the nature of how her ex died, she feels obligated to go visit the mother.
Whose name they say a lot, Mrs. Trefoil.
So Stephanie goes to visit Mrs. Trefoil, played by Tallulah Bankhead. Mm-hmm. And immediately we can see that this lady is like crazy as hell.
Uh-huh.
Super religious, and is basically like, oh, well, you're my daughter because my son loved you, and now that he's dead, under God's eyes, you need to remain loyal to him. And it's a good thing you both were virgins because, of course, you never had sex because neither of you are married.
But you were his betrothed.
So you just need to like be here with me, and I need to cleanse you to make sure you're pure for my husband or my son when you finally meet him in heaven.
Yeah, she's basically like, you're going to live out here with me for the rest of your days as a virgin.
The most frustrating part of the movie is Stephanie Powers is kind of like playing along with this. I would have been like, give me my shit, I gotta get out of here.
Uh-huh.
But things go from bad to worse because it's clear Tallulah is not going to let Stephanie leave. And then at a point,
She's making preparations to leave, and then she gets locked in her room.
Tallulah Bankhead has staff, including a man named Harry.
That's Peter Vaughn. Mm-hmm.
And Harry's wife, Anna,
played by Eutha Joyce,
also works for Tallulah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I mean, I wouldn't say butler and maid because she's not that fancy, but they work for her.
Yes.
This married couple.
And do her bidding. Mm-hmm.
Harry is a creep.
Harry's a creep, but he also is playing along because he expects to inherit.
He's related to Tallulah Bankhead's character. So he says to the audience and his wife, you know, we just got to put up with her nonsense until she dies, and then it'll all be mine. I mean, ours. So they...
and there's another character.
Oh my God. Donald Sutherland plays a character named Joseph. And he is, again, referencing Ben Stiller in Tropic Thunder. He's very simple Jack.
Yeah.
But Harry attempts to sexually assault Stephanie Powers, and Tallulah catches him. Mm-hmm. And kills him
and leaves him in the basement. Yep.
And that's when things go left real quick, because it's the beginning of the third act where Stephanie's fiance finally decides to go look for her after she's been gone for days.
Yeah.
And he goes to the small town and he's asking around for Mrs. Trefoil. He makes his way there. He rescues her. And then Mrs. Trefoil, Tallulah Bankhead's character, dies because Anna realizes that, because Tallulah told Anna, oh, I sent your husband to go run some errands in London. But then she realizes in the 11th hour that that's a lie after Stephanie's fiance rescues her. And then she sees her dead husband in the basement. So Anna kills Tallulah. The end. Mm-hmm. So you watch this movie because you're writing an article for Spin?
Yeah, about, the polite name for this subgenre that was kicked off by Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is Grand Dame Guignol, but also known as hagsploitation and psycho biddy horror.
So this sort of phenomenon in the 60s.
In this is anticipation of the new film starring Brandy and Catherine Hunter, The Front Room.
But this genre of film was like in the 60s, right?
There are technically examples of it before that, but it's because of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane that it was seen as something that could make money. So then you saw all of these faded, aging actresses play these kind of over the top
in these B horror films.
B horror movies, yeah.
So this is in that vein of like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, or which I think is a better example.
Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte.
Or that's a really good example. Lady in a Cage is a really good example. Some more over the top examples would be like Trog.
Joan's last film.
Or a Straight Jack. I mean, Joan did a couple.
Joan, Betty, Shelley Winters did quite a few.
And then a more modern example would Watch Her in the Woods with Betty Davis be an example?
Yeah, that's considered.
Yeah, like that's what, 80s? Well, late 70s.
That's like 80, I think.
Yeah.
But there are modern examples of it. I'd say Isabelle Huppert in Greta is
or
one of those.
Octavia Spencer in Ma.
Or Kathy Bates in Misery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think this movie's kind of in the middle. I enjoyed it well enough. I think you have to be in the mood.
I think even Mommy Dearest.
Sure. Wow, unintentionally.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But Tallulah Bankhead is by far the reason to watch this movie, because she is just over the top crazy.
And if you know anything about her personal life, it's even more delicious.
Because she's playing this like ultra religious woman who doesn't want any vices, no alcohol, smoking, you can't even wear red,
no mirrors.
But then in real life she was quite sexual and a drunk, and I'm sure quite vain. And
so that she became ill during production, and the producers tried to remove her, recast her, but she put up her salary to ensure her spot in the film. And it's directed by Silvio Nerozano. And the only other film I've seen by this director is a much different, tonally a much different film called Georgie Girl with Lynn Redgrave and Charlotte Rampling the year after this. But she sued the producers. The original title was Fanatic. And then in the US, it was released as Die, Die, My Darling, which is a line in the film. And she was pissed about that. And another funny thing about that line reading is in the film, there was something wrong with the audio. So they had to loop her. So she had to come in and she came in purportedly 4 hours late and drunk off her ass. And it took all day for her to get this line recorded correctly. And in 2010, there was a stage production called Looped, I believe, about that experience. And her co-star, Stephanie Powers, performed as playing Tallulah Bankhead in a film about the experience of that scene and the looping of that scene.
I'm just going to try to quickly get through my notes. We were married in Boston.
Yes.
And I was laughing at the beginning of the film because I was thinking, I like to get mad in my head for no reason.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But I was thinking if we would have showed up in Boston to get married, because we weren't living in Massachusetts at the time.
Uh-huh.
We show up and you tell me like, oh, you need to go visit your dead ex's mom. Like, what? Oh my God.
I mean, he acts annoyed with her.
He is in my opinion rightfully annoyed, but the fact that she's kind of like, what? Bitch.
Well, and then she's like,
I'd have to shake the shit out of you. I don't know.
She's like, give me the keys to the car. And he's like, works in television. So he's getting dropped off
Like
at
a
some TV studio.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm going to drive. He's like, do you even know how to drive? And then clearly she can't drive a clutch.
Manual transmission. Yeah.
I would be annoyed at her as well. She's beautiful though. I think
she looks like if you mix Mary Tyler Moore and Raquel Welch.
Yeah.
She's beautiful.
She's very striking. And she is autonomous. She is a strong-willed female, which makes it even more frustrating that she lets herself be backed into this corner that she has lots of opportunity.
Well, especially in the beginning, yeah. But yeah, the real star of the movie is Tallulah, and she's funny from the beginning because she's being very pushy with Stephanie, and I started laughing because Tallulah thinks her son died a virgin, and the look on Stephanie's face is like, oh, sure, gal, if that's what you want to believe. Okay, so in Tallulah's room, she has like photos of her dead son who has gay face. He's very handsome, which you would expect if he's engaged to Stephanie Powers.
It's very Sebastian Venable.
Well, you know what it reminded me of? Because we just made fun of it in the movie The Fabulous Four. Because in that film, we get old photos of Bette Midler with her husband, but they're all photoshopped. And I thought that Steven in this movie, the dead son, the photos that we see of him look like photos that they used to superimpose Bette Midler onto.
And they also use old photos of Tallulah, who were given a backstory that she used to be a sinful performer.
She was an actress, and I would assume quite popular because in her basement, she has a drag room, and she has like a lot of costumes and photos.
And we don't see that till the end, and all her colorful clothes because she thinks red is the sign of the devil.
Yeah.
But it was giving Meryl Streep singing Songbird in Death Becomes Her because I see me, I see me.
On her and Tallulah screaming the devil's color.
And
Tallulah likes to scream her, like the one lady who works for her, Anna. She's like, Anna.
I love Tallulah's voice. She has
a great voice.
She has a growl that was probably deepened with probably smoking. But Alan, the fiance, when he first comes to her estate, he's driving a red car, and she
touches it like
she recoils, and as he's driving away, she goes filth.
She goes filth, corrupter. Like, damn, I can't have a red car.
My God, girl.
She won't even let Stephanie wear red lipstick. We also see that, of course, Tallulah's character admonishes vanity, so there are no mirrors in her house. But then when we get down to her drag room, we see that's where all the mirrors were.
That's where all the mirrors are. And she has one moment, kind of breakdown moment, where she digs in her own room to the bottom of the bureau, and she has a mirror and a bottle of liquor and some lipstick.
So Stephanie's original plan was, I'm just going to go visit with this lady for an hour. And her fiance is like, well, that's really far away. you can't drive back. She's like, well, I'll just go stay at like a lodge. So she goes, and then Tallulah's like, oh, well, you're spending the night because we have to go to church tomorrow because we
Ugh.
have to pray for my son. And so Stephanie gets strong armed into staying. When we see Harry, the man who works for Tallulah, grabbing that he has grabbed Stephanie's suitcases and is taking them up to the guest room, I would have been like, oh no. And then Tallulah tells Harry, oh, go put her car in the shed.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been my like, give me my car keys, go get my suitcases. Like, no. Why are you in my car?
Well, especially because there's a moment where there's this interim between that moment and dinner. And it's like, I would have just done my Irish goodbye.
Speaking of dinner, because Stephanie has laid down to take a nap, and then she's awakened to say that you're summoned for service, like church service. So Stephanie gets all dolled up thinking she's going to church, and then they walk downstairs and church is being held like in the living room. You know how mad I'd be if I got dressed up and we're just listening to you ramble off verses from the Bible in your living room.
I mean, it wouldn't happen. I would be gone. But that's
God.
Me.
And then poor Donald Sutherland, he has nothing to do but look slack-jawed. And he's standing in the service, and I laughed because he's holding his Bible upside down.
Yeah.
Like, we know he's not reading it. And then we sit down for dinner, and I was also laughing thinking that they served like dinner oatmeal, basically. But then Tallulah doesn't believe in seasoning.
Nope.
So it's just like barley oats.
Because she says God's food should be unadorned or something. It's like, ugh.
I
triggered.
If it wouldn't have been someone going into my car and taking my stuff out or trying to drive my car into a garage, it would have been her, Tallulah, asking Stephanie, are you a virgin? Well, are you? I need to know. And Stephanie's dumbass says yes, which I guess, what else can you say? I'm about to argue with this old woman.
But it's also like, how many red flags, even by the time she's asked about her virginity, it's like, get the hell out of there.
Okay, I have to say that I think that the film, I probably would have given it a half a point higher if it weren't for the score.
To me, and I don't like the opening credits, but the opening credits and the score make this feel like a 60s film, and almost everything else about it feels like it's coming out at least a decade later. And that might be because the psycho biddy horror, including Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, most of those were black and white in the 60s because they were trying to make the women less garish, and Tallulah's in full-on color.
Yeah. So it's at this point that things start to get tense, and it's clear that because, well, what really happens is the next morning they wake up to go to church, and we get to the church, and because Tallulah's saying, I can't go to regular service because I have a problem with the priest. So they have to go outside of service hours. But then when they get there, there are only two in the church. The priest comes out, and Tallulah gets mad and leaves, which was a funny scene because the priest goes, oh, Mrs. Trefoil, you don't have to leave. And she gets up and leaves, and he looks like, oh, darn, she left.
Yeah.
But as they're walking away, Stephanie's like, well, what's up with that? Well, I don't agree with how he handled.
He renounced his wedding.
Renounced his wedding vows and married and like had another woman. And at first, Stephanie's like, "Oh, okay, like, well, that is kind of foul." But then she realizes, "Oh no, his first wife died, and so he remarried. So what's wrong with that?" And Tallulah is like, "You trollop, like you think that's okay?" Not knowing that this lady in front of her is about to get married to another man. But they get into an argument, and Stephanie runs back to the house.
Well, she spills the beans. She's like, I was going to leave your son.
Well, she goes, I need to tell you this. Even if your son hadn't died, we wouldn't have gotten married.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then when she goes back to the house, they lock her in, and then that's where things get real tense. But this is where it also gets really frustrating because Stephanie Powers' character is so weak. Like, she just...
I mean, so Tallulah has a gun.
And the way Tallulah is holding this gun, this little pocket pistol, which of course I would be afraid of the gun.
It's very Joan Crawford in Sudden Fear.
But this is an old lady who's not like...
But she's got Anna kind of as her henchman who's manhandling Stephanie Powers. And Anna's giving me Shawnee Smith mixed with Billy Whitelaw vibes.
Mm-hmm. There were just so many moments when I thought, I would have beat the hell out of that old lady.
Oh yeah. Well, and then there's a couple. She's first locked up in the bedroom, and she throws a chair out the window. It's like, jump out that window. There's a roof you can get on. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just a subconscious nightmare of mine. But I I would have done everything I could have immediately to get out of there.
Well, she does eventually jump out the window, and then
But at the wrong, she
she
doesn't wait
does, and
till
she makes it all the way down to the river. But then I thought that scene was weak again because Harry is on a boat and basically just circles her until she gets tired and almost
yes.
drowns, and then
Mhm.
they passes out and they drag her back.
And they do that because they see her dangling out the window because people are still awake, girl. Wait till the dead of
Right,
night.
right. There's a funny. There are a lot of Tallulah just looks so stank. It's so funny to me. And there's a scene where she's reading the Bible to Stephanie while holding the pistol.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Or she's also holding the pistol, feeding her oatmeal.
There's a good scene where they're in the kitchen and Tallulah's reading the Bible again to Stephanie, and Stephanie is like talking over her, telling Anna like, "I'll give you $1,000 if you get me out of here. My family's rich. Actually, I'll give you $2,000." But then poor Anna, she's been beaten down because
Yeah.
Tallulah tells her like, "Bitch, what do you think Harry's gonna do with $2,000? He's gonna leave your ass." Like, so then of course Anna doesn't do anything. But then we see that Harry hates his aunt
Mm-hmm.
because he's outside shooting a tin can with a photo of Tallulah on it. I thought that was funny. Um, so so in the beginning, it's mentioned that Stephanie's ex, whose name is Steven, Tallulah's son, it's alluded that like the way he died was not like a kind way to die. But we don't know how he dies until close to the end when Stephanie tells Tallulah, "Well, that's why your son killed himself because you're such a bitch," basically. And we find out that Tallulah, if she did know it, she wasn't accepting it, but it
Yeah.
seems like she didn't know because she goes, "No, he died in a car accident." And Stephanie goes, "Yeah, he caused that car accident because he wanted to die." Oh,
It strikes me that it feels like Psycho, but from the mother, like Norma Bates' point of view. Instead of Norman's the dead one, and Norma Bates is the one. Because the whole thing about Mrs. Bates was, "You're playing with girls again, Norman."
so Stephanie's fiance, he does show up at Mrs. Trefoil's house and he says, "Yeah, my fiance came to visit you and she hasn't come home." And of course, Tallulah plays it off like, "Oh, well, she left days ago, so I hope she's okay. But, she left a scarf here. So when you see her, make sure to give this back to her." And of course, the fiance doesn't think anything's weird. And then he goes to a bar and we see that because Harry, the guy who works for Tallulah, who's a creep, he's having an affair on Anna. And he stole one of Stephanie Power's brooches and gave it to this waitress at the restaurant or the bar.
That we see earlier in the film, because on the back side of the brooch there
It says Alan.
it says "Love from Alan."
So as an audience, we see this waitress wearing the server wearing the brooch, so we know that that's going to clue Alan into something, and it does. So then when he goes back, he
strong arms his way in there.
well, he doesn't have strong arm too hard because initially Anna doesn't want to help, but then when she realizes that Tallulah was lying about her husband, she points Alan in the right direction.
And that's also where we learn that Donald Sutherland's Joseph is a lot more aware of things going on than you'd think.
Yes. There, it's at this moment, too, that Tallulah's shooting through the door and she actually shoots Donald Sutherland's character, but she runs out of bullets. And the way she was shaking the gun was so funny. She was shaking it like she was trying to like get the last bit of ketchup out the bottle. Like, ma'am, you haven't replenished those bullets, like reloaded that gun. Why would you think it wouldn't run out? But to mention the line of the film, "Die, die, my darling," Tallulah tells that to Stephanie because her plan, now that everything's gone south, is that she thinks she has to kill Stephanie Powers so that she can be reunited with her dead son.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, this
is a film about religious trauma.
I think this story is really fun and crazy. I think Tallulah Bankhead's giving a really fun performance, and I think Stephanie Powers is giving a pretty decent, like, serious performance.
I agree. The novel was adapted by the great Richard Matheson, who's probably best known for things like The Incredible Shrinking Man and The Omega Man, which is made into a film 3 times, including with Will Smith as I Am Legend. Also, The Box, the Richard Kelly film with Cameron Diaz, with a lot of A Stir of Echoes, a lot of fantastic um, genre work from Richard Matheson. So he seemed kind of perfect to adapt this.
So I did enjoy this. Again, I think it loses steam in the third act. I think, part of the fun of movies like this is to scream at the screen and get really active. And I was, but I think the Stephanie Powers character is a little too weak that it kind of got like annoying.
Right. Where it's
So,
almost like you want to tune out because it's like,
yes.
God, you dummy.
So then when you take those two things and combine it with the score, it left me in the middle.
Sure.
So I would give this film 2.5 out of 5. What would you give it?
3. Tallulah carries this on her shoulders. It's too bad she died and wasn't in more films. But
I would definitely, like, if it sounds interesting, maybe watch it with someone else or a group and whatever sort of libations you enjoy, and just soak it all in.
soak it in.
Well, that's all we have for this film. I know we have a busy week because I'm out of town this weekend, and then
I'll be out of town next
week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
But we still got some things coming up.
I know we're
next
going
week.
to the Instigators.
Mm-hmm. There's new Shyamalan that they aren't screening for press.
No, so we have to watch it on Thursday and
Mm-hmm.
then do like a Zoom.
No, in fact, the publicist finally got back to me saying like, "Oh, well, we'll let you see it if you agree to do an interview," which I do not want to do.
Yeah, no.
So I will pay for it.
Yeah, I'd rather pay. And then we have a review for
Coup, maybe
with
Kneecap.
Peter Sarsgaard and my friend Billy Magnuson. So that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I did like that movie.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all I have. Anything else?
No.
Ta-ta.